Hi guys, I'm Ruth from Beltane Gifts and welcome to the crafting Chez. Now we are currently on lockdown here in the UK, which is why I'm in here, which is my workshop stroke garage. So please excuse the mess and the strange tools and machinery in the background. I decided that since I was going to be here at home, I would do a few tutorials just to help you guys out, just show you some of the basics of needle felting, some of the other crafts that I sell on my website. There's a link below to the website where you can buy any of the materials that you'll see me using here. I personally love the needle felting, which is why I'm doing these first. I find it really relaxing. For me, it's a bit like meditation. Your mind just goes elsewhere whilst you're doing it. Very soothing. Could have something to do with all the stabbing as well. But yeah, so I thought what we would start with would be one of these, which is a cloud. Now, the reason I did these was because I got an email from a friend just asking, she's pregnant, she's about to have a baby, if I could make her a mobile of stars and clouds. And I thought if I was doing that, why not video myself doing that so that you guys can have a go at home as well. Now this was made from one of these, which is a needle felted ball, and once I had the ball I was able to shape it into whatever I wanted to, in this case a cloud. Now the ball that you're going to be using needs to be felted until it's the same kind of consistency as a large marshmallow, so it's kind of firm to the touch but still quite squishy, and if you try to pull it apart it doesn't want to come. It's felted enough that it's going to hold together. Now once you have your ball, what you're going to need is one of these, which is a bag of rice. This is one I've made filled with rice, dry rice, and it makes a perfect surface for needle felting because when you stab it with your needle will go easily into the surface without damage. Now you've got your felting surface, you're also going to need some of these, which are felting needles. Now I use the generic needles. You can use the gauged ones, which are more expensive. I find these ones do the job, especially if you're learning. The gauge ones, they tend to be a bit more bendy. The metal's better quality, it has a bit more bend to it. Also means that it's more likely to be bent and broken. So if you're going to be starting out, start with the basics, the nice cheap needles. If they break, it's not too much of an issue. And then when you're going to do some more detailed work, some more advanced work, you can move up to the more expensive needles if you want to. Personally, all the projects that I do, I tend to do with the generic needles. And I've also got a link below to my Instagram page. There's some felted projects there. Feel free to check it out. There's some that I've done, and all of them have been done with the generic needles. Now with these needles, I'm not sure if you can see, they have been colour coded. The larger they are, the longer they are, the thicker they are. And the thickest needles I've done is red, medium length, medium thickness needles yellow, and fine needles, which are the shortest, I've done as green. You can have them on the side, you don't need to have them in the holders like I've done. I tend to have them in the holders just because it's easier for me. I can just grab them and just start using. Now when you're needle felting, the needles are very sharp. You are going to need something just to protect your fingers, so I've got these here, which are my leather finger protectors. I apologise to all the vegans and vegetarians out there who don't agree with leather. I have looked for alternatives, but at the moment this is the safest material that I've found for using for this. So these go onto your thumb and index finger of the hand that's holding your work, not onto the hand that's holding the needle, because that's not going to protect you. I've had people do that though. Don't do that. So yeah, fingers are protected. You're going to need somewhere quiet to sit. I recommend just a room on your own. Try not to do it with people around when you first start out, just because they will talk to you, you'll be distracted, you look up, you stab yourself, you break your needle. Somewhere like your room's quite good, garage seems to work, wherever you think is best for you. I'd avoid sort of watching TV at the moment. You can do that, work up to it later on when you start working more often, once you get your practice in. When you're first starting out, somewhere nice and quiet is great.
So today we're felting a cloud. What we're going to need is some finger protectors, something to felt on. We're using a bag of rice here and a selection of generic needles. I've got the large, medium and small, and you're also going to need a ball to felt from, so this is a ball you've pre-felted. I'm going to be starting off stabbing here with the medium needle, which for me is the yellow needle. And what you're going to do is you're going to be stabbing straight down around the centre of the ball, so in the middle there, and you're stabbing straight down quite deeply because we want these lines to stick. So you're going in and out with your needle, and make sure you pull your needle fully out before you move on to the next stab. I am stabbing quite quickly here. You don't need to go this fast. Take your time, make sure that all of the jabs are in the right position. Now if you notice, I'm just rotating the ball as I go, so you rotate as you need to, and what we're creating are these little curves, and they're all going to be joining together, and we're going around the middle of the ball, and we want to do about 5 of these curves. So stabbing up and down, working your way along, just nice, quite medium-sized curves. We don't want too big a curve. We want to just go up and down all the way around there, and this is going to be our base layer of cloud. So we're doing this in the middle because the base layer is going to be, the bottom part of the cloud is going to be the larger section. So stabbing round and round. Take your time, have a look just to see how far you're going. You want to make sure you can fit all of these curves in, so don't be afraid to stop every now and then just to work out how much space you've got left to work with. Okay, so just finishing off this one. I'm going to have a look now just to see what space I've got. It's just about right for one more big curve, so we're just going to fill that in here. Go. And say, remember to remove your needle fully before you move on to your next stab, otherwise you will end up either bending or breaking your needle. And we're stabbing straight down because that gives you the best impact and shows the most difference there when you stab. If you were stabbing at an angle, it would be pushing the fibres sideways rather than straight down, so it wouldn't be as defined. And just to make sure it is really defined, I'm going over again, you can see here, just going over all those lines, just making sure that they stay in place. What you will find when you're stabbing is that the fibre has to go somewhere, so we're trying to compress it all down together so that it all joins in into one big piece. But you'll find that sometimes, just like wearing control pants, the flap has to go somewhere. So if it gets pushed out, you just need to go over it again, get it back where you want it to be. Okay, we've almost gone round again there. So once you've finished, we're going to be moving up to our next layer of rounds. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the apex of one of these curves. Oop, giving it a squish there just to make sure we've got enough squishiness left in the ball. We have, so we're going to start from the topmost point of one of those curves, and we're going to do another curve so that it links in with the next curve along. There we go, because what we're doing is we're joining together those curves. You don't need to do it this way, you could do it a bit more randomly if you wanted to, but this works quite well here. Just gives you somewhere to sort of aim for. Okay, so same as before, it's kind of like halfway up, so 3/4 of the way we're doing these curves, which is going to leave us the topmost section for the top of the cloud. This is going to be the middle part of the cloud we're just defining now. Now, something about the ball we're using a ball that's kind of been felted to a medium extent. There's lots of mediums here. What you want is a ball that's got enough squish to it so that you can squeeze it, so kind of like a big marshmallow consistency. You don't want it to be too well felted. If it's too stiff, if you can't squeeze it enough, then it's very hard for you to get that definition that you need to get these clouds now. So I'm just doing the top section here, I'm just kind of stabbing in. We just want maybe 2 or 3 lumpy sections at the top of the cloud, just sort of something to give it a bit more texture. Okay, I'm just going over those lines again, just to make sure again that all your lines stay defined. What you can do as well is just work in at an angle slightly round the edges, just pushing them in, just to make sure that each individual section now is its own ball almost. So notice I'm pointing from the different angles. When you're working your way round a round shape, you want to work around the outside edges, pushing in towards the centre. By doing that, what you're doing is you're pushing the fibres inwards and bringing that central bit up and making it more rounded. If you were to stab from the same angle across the whole thing, what would happen is that you would be flattening it in that direction. So you're always stabbing at a right angle to the shape you want to create. So here I'm working around the outside edge. For the middle section, for the second set of rounds that we created, we want these to be pushed in slightly, the same with the top, because we don't want the top and the middle to be the same size as the bottom. We want the bottom to be the largest part of the cloud, so definitely a bottom heavy shape. So in order to bring them in, you just have to felt lightly over the whole area, just stabbing all over, just like I'm doing here, and that's going to bring in the whole thing, and then you can start shaping it again and making it more rounded once you've got that shape you want. There we go, so you'll have to go over each of the shapes in turn, just bringing it in, reshaping. Just having a look now at the overall shape, because you need to take time every now and then just to make sure you've got it how you want it, and squishing it there just because the cloud is going to be more of a lozenge shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to flatten it on the front and the back, leaving the sides out so that they're bigger, and this gives you that nice lozenge shape like the kiddies drawn clouds that you want. Okay, so I'm just going over the bottom section here, just bringing in just a little bit, and then just bringing in that medium section, that middle area, just making it smaller again. Okay, so stabbing all over. I'm using a lot of deep stabs at this point because we're trying to squish the whole thing and flatten it slightly in that centre. So deeper stabs close together, and that gives you the definition that you want. You'll also find that when you're doing the lines, the closer your stabs are together, the more defined your line is. So if you wanted to stab around the lumpy sections, you just need to do further apart with your stabs, and it gives you a lighter shaping rather than a real defined one. I'm going over that middle section again, just bringing it in. Same at the top there, just bringing it in from this angle. We're leaving those outside edges at the moment, we're letting those be quite bulky. Again, take time to look at the overall shape. You want to be looking at everything. Take the time just to see how you want it to look in your head, and then transfer it onto the ball. Okay, bringing down that top part again, and going over those lines again, because again, as you push in the top sections, where you've defined the lines is going to become less defined over time. Okay, so now we're just going over the bottom a little bit, just rounding up the base of that cloud. So we're going to want the base of the cloud to be quite flat there. So to do that, as I said about the right angles, we're going to be stabbing at a right angle to what we want to flatten. We're going to stab over that section there at that right angle, and see how it's pushing in the base of the cloud. That's what we want. We want it to be slightly flattened. We don't want it to be too flat. We want the whole thing to be quite rounded, but we just want to bring it in just a bit more. Now that's pushed everything up, so we're just going over the lower level of rounds, and we're just defining those a little bit towards the base. See how that's rounding out the shape. So just really lightly, just quite far apart these stabs, we're just bringing it in and upwards there. Notice how the needle is changing angles as well. We want to get that rounded shape, so you stab from different angles to achieve that, not always at that same one angle. Go again, moving round, and this is just bringing in that area again because that's sticking out a bit further than we want. There we go, and we're stabbing upwards now, and we're just bringing it into shape. You'll find that the lower section is still quite squishy, so you can go over that quite lightly just to make it that little bit firmer without losing the shape you've created. And just tidying up here. You'll find that if you stab quite loosely, not too deep over the top surface, that can just bring in any loose fibres, any bits that's sticking out more than others. We don't want to change the whole structure of the shape, we just want to change the surface. So to do that, you only need to stab very lightly. The deeper you stab, the more structural the stab is, because the more fibres you're catching and pushing together. We just want to lightly shape that surface, unless of course you're doing these lines here, in which case you stab that bit deeper just to make sure they stay put. So again, having a look at the other sides of it. Are there bits that you don't like? If so, just stab over those a little bit more. I always say, if it doesn't look right to you, if you don't like it, it's not finished yet. You can keep going. And don't worry if you overdo any sections, you can always add more fibre on top. So just one last look over to see if there's anything else that needs changing. Some little stabs around the top just to bring it in that little bit more. And then that's it, just in the medium area again, just bringing that in. And that's just about done.